Welcome to Rockstar Math. My name is Amy, your master tutor. I'm here to introduce you to Algebra 2. So the big question I want to answer today really is, what's the difference between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2? So you already made it through Algebra. Maybe you took pre-Algebra, maybe you didn't. And if you've watched my videos, then you would know that Algebra was sort of when we introduced these letters. And now there's a little bit more restrictions on when we can add things. Are they like terms? Are they not? Sort of like adding fractions, right? You want to make sure they have common denominators. So there's a couple rules before we can progress forward through our operations, such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So what you should have learned in Algebra 1 was how to add things like 3x plus 5x and make sure you can get 8x. You should know that like 3x plus 3x squared cannot be added because they're not like terms, so stuff like that. So in Algebra 1, you were sort of introduced this concept of working with variables, solving equations. Most of your work should have fallen into three groups. Simplify, which is what we do to expressions. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is we solve, and that's what we do to equations. Okay, so we start adding and subtracting to both sides, and we end up maybe getting x by itself, and then we can determine the value of x by doing that. Okay, simplifying is just adding all the like terms, multiplying all the numbers together that can be multiplied together, things like that. And the last thing we're asked to do is usually to graph or plot, and that's usually something we're going to do to functions. So in Algebra 1, you should have learned what a function was. You should understand the difference between that and an equation. Sometimes that's not always clear. Basically, a function has an input and an output. Okay, so the word linear has the word line in it. That's where it comes from. You might have been exposed in Algebra 1 to exponential, which has the word exponent in it. Okay, so that is not like x squared. That is like 2 to the x. That means your variable is in the x. Okay, linear just has some number multiplied by x and maybe some number added to it. And that's going to end up plotting into a straight line. Okay, exponential will not. You should be familiar with quadratics from Algebra 1. Maybe you just touched on it. Maybe you didn't get that into it, but it looks something like ax squared plus bx plus c. You should be able to graph these, factor them, solve if they're set equal to 0 maybe, and maybe you were introduced to the quadratic equation. Okay, so that's, most of what you should have learned in Algebra 1. So what are you going to be doing in Algebra 2? Well, a quadratic means you have an x squared term, maybe an x term, maybe a number term, but definitely an x squared term. Unlike the linear, which just has the x term. Okay, so again, those are not like terms. They're all different. Just as different as 1 foot squared, and 1 cubic foot. So know the difference between those, and then you'll understand why these cannot be added together. All right, so in Algebra 2, you're going to step it up to higher degree polynomials. It might look something like ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d equals 0 now. Okay, it might be 4th power, it might be 5th power. What are those graphs going to look like? That's what you're going to explore in Algebra 2. So a lot of the equations you solved in Algebra 1 might take 1, 2, maybe 3 steps to solve. In Algebra 2, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. It's going to be a few more steps to it. And moving forward to pre-calculus and calculus, same idea. It's just going to be bigger problems, more steps, but the same basic concept of simplifying expressions, solving equations, and graphing functions. That's the heart of it all. All right, and then if you get into some good math, you should be able to verify and prove some things, but not everybody gets into that, depending on your teacher and, again, the rigor of your course. So in Algebra 2, you're also going to be introduced to the idea of a logarithm. So you'll see this notation log of x and the natural log of x. You're also going to be introduced to, the polynomials. So polynomials being the higher degree, like a quadratic with the ax squared, except it's going to be a 3rd power, 4th power, 5th power, and so on. So you get into it. What you also are going to see in Algebra 2 is a little bit of introduction to trigonometry. Okay, and then conics. So what are those? Trigonometry is dealing with triangles, circles, the unit circle. You'll learn all about sines, cosines, and how to find angles on the plane that you plot on normally. So these aren't going to be functions. Okay, they're not going to pass all of the vertical line tests and things like that. Polynomials you'll graph, and they're going to be very bumpy like this. They'll have peaks. They'll have peaks and valleys, and in behavior that goes up or down. They'll have asymptotes and things they approach. So these graphs can get pretty detailed, and you'll learn how to understand all of their properties. And then conics is when you graph things such as an eclipse, or if you graph things such as a parabola, which is what the graph of x squared looks like. So Algebra 2 is going to build on what you learned in Algebra 1. It's going to get more complicated. So what you should be very comfortable with is anything with graphing lines. You should know the slope-intercept form. You should be able to recognize a line when looking at an equation, tell if that's a straight line or not. You should be comfortable with all of your operations with exponents. You should be comfortable with radicals, square roots, things like that. Make sure you have all of that mastered before you go into Algebra 2. Because it's only going to build on, and they won't slow down and review all of Algebra 1 for you. That's where tutors come in. That's where videos come in. And be sure to check out Rockstar Math for any questions you may have. Fill in those gaps by looking up your old skills, and reach out if you need assistance, of course. You will be successful. Keep at it.